feet. This is one of Nairobi's most exclusive neighborhoods. These are high-end properties, mansions, fancy hotels. We're just a few hundred meters from the UN office in Nairobi, and that is what you see over there. That's the reality of the flooding that Kenya has been seeing over this past 2 months. So I'm just going to walk over.
Hello guys. Well, the long rains are still going on. Kenya has experienced the worst case of flooding. Me, I've never seen floods of this magnitude. For the first time, I'm seeing Nairobi in floods. We are seeing floods in places that we've never seen before. We've seen floods in Mathare. We've seen floods in Kasarani. We've seen floods in Athi River. We've seen floods in Joska. We've seen floods in Choka. We've seen floods in Ruiru. We've seen floods in Ahero. What is causing these floods? We've seen so many deaths. People have died because of floods in Kenya. So this is not an issue that should be taken lightly. What is causing this devastation? Why is it that Kenya is being worst hit by floods during this 2024 year? So I just want us to look at a clip that has been done in the last 2 days by Larry Madowo. He has reported about floods happening in one of the high-end neighborhoods in Kenya. And it's very interesting how floods are not discriminating. Floods don't care whether you are living in a high-end neighborhood or whether you are living in a low-end neighborhood. Floods can affect anyone. We've seen a police officer being pulled out of water last week. It was so much heartbreaking. It was so much traumatizing to see that video of a police officer being pulled out of his own car because of floods. What are the causes of floods? Before you start addressing floods in Kenya, you need to understand, why is it that we are having all these huge volumes of water as witnessed in areas like in Kahawa, Sukari? Why do we have these floods happening to this magnitude in Kenya? Before we look at the causes, let us look at some of the effects of floods. And in this video, you will see floods causing devastation in a place like Runda. So watch this.
But I want to show you the impact of the 2 months of rain on one of Kenya's most exclusive neighborhoods. Where I'm standing, you see the water up to my knees is actually part of, this used to be a wall. This is a broken down wall from past flooding. But I want to show you across the wall over on the other side, because that courtyard is completely flooded and the water is higher than my entire height. And I'm 5'9", so that is no small feat. This is one of Nairobi's most exclusive neighborhoods. These are high-end properties, mansions, fancy hotels. We're just a few hundred meters from the UN office in Nairobi, and that is what you see over there. That's the reality of the flooding that Kenya has been seeing over this past 2 months. So I'm just going to walk over across the road, because that water is coming from that compound across the road. This road is officially closed, but that has not stopped people from using it all the same, because this is one of the easier ways to get to where they're going instead of getting rerouted. But this is the reality of the flooding, and that is why so many roads are getting closed, so many people are getting evacuated. The government last Friday ordering people to move, mandatory evacuations for places where they're considered to be in fragile ecosystems likely to flood. They identified 178 different dams that are either full or near full that they ordered people to move. And this morning, because of 6 hours of rain overnight, they closed this road. But that, as you can see, people are still using it, avoiding that government intervention and risking their lives. There have been cases where people have been swept away in their cars, in their motorbikes, in their bicycles because of something like this. Disobeying that government guidance and going through it anyway, not knowing how deep the water is or if there's any sudden change in the currents or anything of the sort, but this is the reality of flooding across the country. This is why so far 228 people have been killed across the country. That is danger. I didn't know how deep this is. 228 people have been killed across the country. More than 160,000 people are displaced. And the forecast, according to President William Ruto, is that there will still going to be more rain throughout this month, possibly into next month. So the damage could be even more significant. We saw, for instance, in Western Kenya on Sunday, River Nyando bursting its banks, leading to flooding the town of Ahero and the neighborhoods there. People were marooned. The Kenya Wildlife Service had to use helicopters to evacuate some people. The county government of Kisumu appealing for help because they now have a few hundred more people who are displaced. That is the reality across the country, where the government has set up more than 100 different sites to take care of people who are displaced. Schools have been postponed indefinitely. Public schools across the country will not be opening until further notice, according to the government, just to make sure that learners are safe. In the meantime, people are risking their lives all the time, just trying to use the quickest ways to get where they're going, Max.
Yeah, it's difficult to see how the government can manage this because of the scale of the flooding, and it's pretty unprecedented, isn't it? But the Kenyan Meteorological Department, as I understand it, did warn a year ago that El Nino could intensify the rainy season, which would have allowed the government to prepare to some extent.
That's absolutely correct. The Kenya Met Department, to their credit, has always warned that we would see enhanced rainfall because of the El Nino weather phenomenon. These warnings have been public. They have made these documents available to government, and that's why there's been so much criticism of the government's response to this. The lack of early warning to citizens to evacuate, the lack of a plan for disaster response as soon as people were, in some cases, the flash floods, where there were mudslides, they were not responded to immediately. So some people died just because the response was inadequate. And now the government of Kenya appealing for foreign countries to help in the disaster response, to help with shelter and food and other non-food items, because when you have more than 100,000 people displaced, the government just cannot deal with it. So far, they've received some aid from the United Arab Emirates, but the need is just so far greater than what's available right now, Max.
Okay, Larry in Nairobi, thank you.
Guys, after watching those clips about the effects of floods in Kenya, what do you think is causing these floods? And what do you think should be done to control this situation in future? Do you think floods are being caused by climate change, as we are being told? Do you think that floods are being caused by some artificial forces? I've heard about artificial rain. Do you think floods are being caused by man-made actions like uncontrolled buildings? For example, people are just building anywhere. People are building on the courses of rivers. People are building on riverbanks. Why do we have so much water not flowing past the drainage? Is it the clogging? Is it the garbage? What do you think should be done? What do you think the government should be doing to control or to prevent future floods? We've seen in Nairobi a case where people who are supposed to be in charge of disaster management or mitigation don't even have the right qualification. I was shocked that somebody is managing disasters in Nairobi with a degree in theology. And this was raised by one of the senators. Senator Sifuna raised that issue that the guy who is in charge of disaster management in Nairobi has a degree in theology. Do you think there's a problem? Do you think this is a problem to do with the corruption in Kenya? So let me know your feedback. What do you think as an individual you can do to help prevent not corruption, floods in Kenya? What actions do you need to be taking? What actions should your neighbors be doing in order to prevent future catastrophes that are caused by rain? Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.